denied her the pleasure.
Let us free the Roman people of their long-standing anxiety, seeing that they find it tedious to wait for an old man's death. It is no magnificent victory to defeat a man unarmed and betrayed.
With that, Hannibal put a drink of poison to his lips and drained his cup. But even Hannibal's suicide was not victory enough. After so many years of war, Rome still saw Carthage as an enemy and could not abide her survival in any form. In 146 BC, Rome destroyed the African Empire once and for all in the final Punic War, slaughtering 500,000 people. The pearl of the Mediterranean is ground into dust. Carthage is no more. Rome now controlled the entire Mediterranean, along with parts of Spain, southern Gaul, and the Italian peninsula. At the same time, Rome's power was spreading eastward. In all, Roman armies held more than 250,000 square miles. In 3 centuries, a small backwater city had become a dominant world power. In the past 50 years alone, she more than tripled her domain. Her military was the most successful fighting force the world had ever known. No power on earth could truly threaten her, and every nation in her reach had reason to fear. But success wasn't all it's cracked up to be. More than a century after the wars against Carthage began, Rome was left drained, both financially and emotionally. War-weary Romans had lost hundreds of thousands of sons to bloody battles in faraway lands. Surviving soldiers had been fighting so long, they barely remembered their homes. One thing became clear. A non-professional citizen army was no longer adequate for an empire the size of Rome's. It would fall largely to one man to professionalize the Roman military, a general and politician named Gaius Marius. Marius saw the need for far-reaching changes in the structure of the Roman army. To be a soldier would now be a career in itself, not merely a sideline for landed citizens. Marius recruited even the poorest Romans into the legions and issued them standardized equipment, making them the best outfitted soldiers in the ancient world. Including weapons, a soldier carried at least 80 pounds on his back, earning troops of this era the nickname Marius's Mules. Rome's first true professional soldiers were even more fit and better disciplined than earlier armies. But the biggest change of all, this new class of warrior had a special relationship with its commander. When they became veterans, Marius would personally see to it that his men received a grant of land, often in recently conquered territories. In the end, this was more than a generous perk for poor soldiers with no farms to return to. In fact, it was revolutionary. Suddenly, a soldier's first loyalty was to the general who recruited him and took care of him in old age, and not to the state.
For the first time, the soldier looked to the general, not only for allegiance, but for pay, for retirement benefits, if you will. And then over time, then the army began to dominate the state rather than the state dominating the army. And that's the terrible legacy of Marius.
Powerful generals now controlled their own private armies. Soon, they would use them however they saw fit, even against Rome herself. By the 1st century BC, a powerful general called Lucius Cornelius Sulla would be the first to cash in on the loyalty of his men. And Sulla was famous for commanding the affections of soldiers.
It was Sulla more than anyone else who set the example. In order to corrupt and win over the soldiers of other generals, he gave his own troops a good time and spent money lavishly on them. He was thus at the same time encouraging the evils of both treachery and of debauchery. Plutarch.
In 89 BC, when the Senate ordered Sulla to hand over control of his army in southern Italy, he refused, and his troops remained fiercely devoted to him. Armed with 6 renegade legions, more than 30,000 men, Sulla then did an astonishing thing. He marched on the city of Rome. Once in control of the city, Sulla's soldiers went on a bloody rampage.
Hundreds of Sulla's political enemies were then rounded up and executed, and he was the first among several generals who was to use his military forces in this way.
Sulla planted his own supporters in power and quickly left the city in peace, but nothing in Rome would ever be the same. A Roman general used his troops to enforce his own political power. It was the first time, but it would by no means be the last. Soon, another Roman army would march against Rome, led by a great leader, politician, and general. A man named Julius Caesar.
He was a slightly built man with soft and white skin who suffered from headaches and was subject to epileptic fits. He was particular in his personal appearance and dress, was clean-shaven, and was sensitive of his premature balding. Plutarch.
Shrewd and intense, the future dictator clearly saw his path to power. Only by victory on the battlefield could a politician hope to be taken seriously as a leader in Rome. Now 40 years old, Caesar needed a war to win, and the obvious choice was to make one of his very own in a place called Gaul. The Senate named Caesar governor of 3 provinces, Illyricum, Cisalpine, and Transalpine Gaul, the only parts of Gaul Rome controlled. Caesar hungered for the rest. The Gauls had long been the most powerful and successful people of northern and central Europe. By Caesar's time, they dominated the lands of modern France, England, and Ireland. The Romans considered them barbarians, but Gallic culture was actually quite advanced. And yet, what the Gauls were most famous for was their bloodlust in battle. They excelled in psychological warfare. They wore body paint and caked their hair with lime and mud, terrifying the methodical Romans. 5 million Gauls stood between Caesar and the glory he craved. If he could add the lands of modern France to Roman territory, he would hugely increase his reputation and his power. In 58 BC, on the excuse of stopping a Gallic tribe from entering Roman territory, Caesar moved his legions into Gaul. And for the next decade, the bold general does precisely what he set out to do: conquer. Tribe after tribe, battle after battle, Caesar prevailed against the Gauls again and again. By Caesar's own accounts, it was a slaughter.
The campaign in Gaul of Julius Caesar is very well known, and very often people see it as somehow epitomizing Roman imperialism. What people forget is that Julius Caesar was proud of the fact that in Gaul he killed 1 million Gauls. That's genocide.
Though he's considered one of history's great generals, Caesar was not a tactical genius. Instead, he had incredible fortitude and a genius for inspiring others. Caesar won the devotion of his soldiers by marching alongside them, eating the same food and sleeping on the ground as they did.
He forged a military machine during these campaigns, the likes of which had not really been seen prior to this in Roman history. He built an army composed of troops that were fanatically loyal to him, particularly the legionary infantry who fought along with him.
Today, it's called Alise-Saint-Rene in modern France. In 52 BC, it was known as Alesia, the decisive battleground